We're now live, so you can start the meeting.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming to this audit and standards meeting. Have I got any apologies for absence?
Francis Mason.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Carter. You are still on mute.
Simon, I think you muted yourself rather than unmuting.
You are still on mute. You're not on mute now.
No, because the host has unmuted me. I'll try again. I declare Sorry?
Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
I declare a pecuniary interest as a remunerated council-appointed director of HCS Property Environment Limited. I will leave the meeting in the event of financial matters relation to HCS being discussed.
Thank you, Simon. Minutes from the last meeting, they're on pages 3 to 5. Are they a fair and accurate record?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Lovely. Any matters arising? No. Brilliant. That's a good start. Any written questions or petitions, Adam?
There are none.
One day you'll say yes to that and I'll be shocked and won't know what to do. Moving nothing into non-contentious business, but and then I'll go on to the committee work plan to noting on page 6.
Sorry, Chair, before we progress,
Yep.
just a couple of points I'd like to raise. One is for the benefit of whoever's doing the risk management progress report. It's usual courtesy that if there is a single item like that's brought forward, so they don't have to sit through the whole meeting before they do their bit. That's entirely up to you, of course. The other thing is I'm a bit confused. Item 9 is the audited annual accounts. Item 11 is the audit results report.
Yeah.
We're being asked to sign off a 130-page detailed financial report, which we only received yesterday, before we deal with the audit results report at item 11. We're not experts and we only received the accounts yesterday, but we're being bounced into agreeing something about which we may have questions based on what the auditors have reported. Also, I do not appear to have a copy of item 8, the annual audit letter.
So quickly on the point of 14, unfortunately, the officer who was going to present that report isn't able to be with us at this meeting. So right. Simon Freeman is going to report it instead. So okay. I could bring it forward for this courtesy of Simon, but he is stuck for the rest of the meeting anyway. So that would seem no doubt. I will pass over to Simon for the answer to the second bit, if that's okay with Simon Freeman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So yeah, I appreciate they are large documents. I'm sure our friends from BDO will make a point later on in response to this, but essentially the accounts have been in the public domain for approximately 15 plus months. And from memory, because it is a long time ago now, I think they were presented to the committee at an early stage of being draft. So I think the real focus for the purpose of the meeting this evening was really to bring the members of the committee up to date with the audit work that's been carried out, which is contained within the audit results report from BDO. And the committee may remember that the approval of the accounts and the management letter of representation had previously been delegated to myself in consultation with the chair of the committee. And in view of the time that's elapsed, I did take the view that it would be beneficial to bring them back to the committee out of courtesy prior to that action being undertaken.
Councillor Clark, then Councillor Carter.
Yes, thank you. Well, just while we're on complaints, Chair, apart from the lateness, vast numbers of documents, which I try assiduously to go through, even though we've seen them in the past eventually. But there's also the issue, which is really related to the external auditors, of the size of the print of a lot of the reporting. And I would make an appeal in the future. My eyesight is declining, I know that, but I can read the ordinary reports without any problem. But some of those, and some of our own actually, reports are really practically unreadable without a magnifying glass in my case.
Jean, I think we're very lucky to be joined by Steve Bladen, who will be doing the audit report next year for us. So I think he's probably just heard those comments.
Yes, I was hoping he had. Yes.
And further to that, I think, yes, absolutely. I think sometimes the size of the print on our own reports can be a bit little. I think that is probably heard by Simon Freeman as well and can be taken further going forward. Back to Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to Mr. Freeman's comments, the page 23 of the annual accounts presented to us yesterday, the comprehensive income and expenditure statement has been totally rewritten and the numbers have changed enormously. Now, there's no way we can sign off a change like that without having some understanding as to what's been going on. I mean, for example, the total income and expenditure, the bottom line on that has changed from negative 15.785 million to negative 7.67 million. Now, that's a substantial movement in anybody's language, and we need to know, what the hell has been going on. So, when we get round to it, I'm going to move that we actually delay signing this off until we get all the answers to the internal auditors' questions and the final numbers put into a report and a timetable plan for improvements to the processes to produce the plan. Because, as Mr. Freeman said, we actually signed this off on the 11th of September last year. So what on earth is going on?
Okay, I think my response is is the time limitation of you seeing the documents impacting on us discussing the documents now?
Yeah.
Right, because my point was I was going to take 8 to 11 on block because I think that was probably the best way forward. But if people are saying that they haven't had enough, I will pass back to Simon.
Thanks, Chair. I think for the purpose of the committee meeting this evening, I think the discussion that's going to take place as a result of the items that the Chair has just referred to, i.e. 8 through to 11, will draw to the committee's attention the key issues that have been addressed during the audit and have created the movements that Councillor Carter has referred to. The majority being related directly to the assets and the way they are represented in the accounts and the pension adjustments that have taken place largely as a result of the HTS group being incorporated into the council's statements for the first time.
What I was going to propose is to take 8 and 11 on block because they seem related to each other and duplication will occur. Do I have agreement of the committee to take those on block? I will take that as a yes because no one said otherwise. So I will move on to item 8 to 11 and pass over to the external auditors. I don't know if I'm passing to Steve or Francesca on this one. So I'll wait for the first one to talk.
Chair, Francesca's going to take you through the report on last year's accounts.
Lovely. Okay, I just welcome Francesca and Steve here from BDO as well. Sorry, I didn't do that at the start of the meeting.
Fine. Steve,
Thank you.
first. Thank you. Right. Okay, we're presenting the draft audit completion report for the 18-19 audit. Parts of this you've seen before, and I was only proposing to draw out the significant changes to previous information we've given you rather than going through the whole report in full detail. Happy to take questions either at the end or as we go through. Either's fine. If we do them as we go through, it sometimes helps. So if we sort of start on page 3 and 4 of our report, which is our sort of initial overview. We've previously reported that we've had significant issues with the quality of the working papers and accounts that we provided with for audit, and these resulted in significant delays. I came and spoke to you in June about some of these issues, and you're aware of those at that point. The main points to draw out are we've identified a number of errors in the accounts. We've got 4 material post-prior period adjustments which relate to HTS pensions, which Simon's just talked about, accounting treatment in the enterprise zone, and Kia Harlow.
Sorry, Francesca, can I interrupt for a second?
Councillor
You're discussing the annual audit letter.
No, I'm discussing the audit results report. We haven't issued an annual audit letter, sorry, because we can't issue an annual audit letter until we've signed the accounts. I'm doing the report that's got cogs on the front.
Yeah, we've got 2 of them.
If I could just, if you don't mind, Chair, just on that point, the report that Francesca's presenting actually does include an outline audit letter, and it also includes an outline management letter of representation. So they're kind of contained within the document, even though they're not the separate finalised pieces of work in their own right, but the content and the context of them is contained within the paper that Francesca's presenting to you at the moment.
What a mess. Right. Thank you.
So yeah, so we can't issue an annual audit letter until we've completed the audit, so therefore we can't present that. And the letter of representation, we have a draft at the back of the audit results report.
Thank you.
So I was just saying we had 4 material prior year adjustments, 3 further immaterial prior year adjustments, which have combined with being material. So therefore you elected to adjust, the council elected to adjust 2 of those, 13 in-year adjusted audit differences, and a further 9 unadjusted in-year differences. As a result of these issues, we are then reporting to you that we consider you've got significant deficiencies in internal control, and those are set out on page 7. That we have to report to you those in writing. The latest set of draft accounts that we've been given has still got some internal inconsistencies in it, and therefore there will be a further set of accounts after the ones we've got tonight that we still need to see. We've made detailed recommendations about the significant deficiencies further on in the report, but we've talked about them in previous meetings. I can also confirm the firm and the partners BDO still remain independent from the council in accordance with financial reporting ethical standards. So if we go on to page 8, that gives us a summary of the audit risks that we identified at planning stage. And you'll see similar risks later in Steve's audit plan when he presents that for the 1920 audit. Property, plant and equipment is shown as having work ongoing in this area. This work is almost complete. It's just pending partner review. It's the final parts of the last adjustment in relation to the enterprise zone that's been done. So we just need to finalise our audit work on the file, but we don't expect any more issues to come out of that. We will be asking for representations around property, plant and equipment and investment property valuations and pension liability valuations within the letter of rep when we get to that, which is why they're highlighted. The significant control findings that we've got around PPE and investment property relate to the number of adjustments in the accounts, and those all link together. So it's kind of a continuous theme through the report. Pages 9 to 16 then go into more detail on these risks that we identified. The first one of these is management override of controls. Auditors or management are presumed to have a risk of management override of controls in all entities, and that comes out of one of the auditing standards. Therefore, we planned to carry out audit procedures around potential ways that management could manipulate. So it'd be looking at things like journal entries and looking at the estimates and judgments that management make on your accounts to see if there's any deliberate or any indication of deliberate sort of bias or misstatement. Pleased to report we didn't find any of these, and we gained an understanding of all the transactions outside normal course of business, so things like land purchases. The next risk that is also in every audit is expenditure and revenue recognition. So there, under auditing standards, again, there's another presumption that income recognition presents a fraud risk. And in the case of local government, because most of your income comes from grants and taxation, we consider that actually the majority of that could well come from expenditure recognition as well. So as part of this, we carried out some audit work on grants, looking at the income, grants that were in income and making sure they agreed back to grant paying bodies and whether all the recognition criteria had been met. Tested a sample of fees and charges to make sure they've been recognised in the correct period and things weren't being moved between years. And then tested a sample of expenditure either side of year end, again to make sure the expenditure had been recorded in the correct period, so the year end position wasn't being manipulated. Our testing didn't identify any issues with these areas either. Then if we go on to page 11, we go on to property, plant and equipment and investment property valuations. Due to the fact that property, plant and equipment and investment property valuations tend to be based on quite significant assumptions which are made by the council in consultation with their valuers, and they're very large figures, we consider that has a significant risk on it. We carried out the planned work around looking at the instructions to the valuer, making sure the valuer is a suitable person to do the work, making sure the valuation base was appropriate based on their usage, and looking at the requirements of the SIPFA Code of Practice. Looked at the information that the council provided to the valuer to make sure that actually that was accurate. Reviewed the assumptions that the valuer used and compared those to our knowledge from other valuers to make sure that actually are they in line with expectations, like are there unusual movements there? And then looked at any PPE not specifically revalued in the year had been assessed to make sure that reported values weren't going to result in material misstatement of the accounts. Part of our work on PPE, we identified that the treatment of revaluation gains and losses have been incorrect for a number of years. This relates to one of the prior period adjustments I mentioned earlier, where you've got a £1.9 million unadjusted error from 18-19, which the council's chosen not to adjust. But the accounts were amended for the error the prior period adjustment was for 17-18. The accounts were amended for 18-19's error of just over 400,000. We identified further issues with the revaluation reserve accounting. The council went away and did some more work on this and identified that the Harlow Enterprise Zone accounting had been incorrect for a number of years. This again has now been amended in the revised accounts that Simon's presenting. We've also still got a further £1.1 million difference between the revaluation reserve and the PPE disclosures that we can't reconcile, and this is one of the unadjusted audit differences, but there's no impact on the general fund as a result of that because it's one of the reversing adjustments that goes through. If we go on to page 14, we then talk about the pension liability valuation. Again, pension liability, it's a large number, it's based on estimates, but the council engaged Barnett Waddingham as the fund actuary to provide the information. We review that information, look at the information that's been provided to the actuary, and look at the assumptions they use. And we compare the assumptions used by Barnett Waddingham to information provided by PwC, who act as a consulting actuary to all the local government auditors. And I'm pleased to say there are no issues there. We did have an adjusted audit difference on the pension fund, which I think I've spoken to you before, in relation to the McLeod case, just over £1 million. And the council adjusted their accounts to reflect that. The final risk that we identified in our audit plan was the treatment of the HTS pension liability. We were aware at the time that you were looking at the treatment of the HTS pension costs and liabilities within your accounts and how that should best be presented in accordance with the accounting standards. And we discussed this in the past, that you amended the account as part of the audit process to reflect the to make sure the HTS pension assets and liabilities were removed from your single entity, the council accounts, and just shown in the group accounts, because it's an HTS liability, not a council liability. On page 17, we talk about the poor quality of the working papers and the quality of the accounts presented to audit. These, because I think these have been raised before. I mean, I brought the interim results report last September, so I wasn't proposing to spend too long on those. If we go on to page 19, we can start talking about the unadjusted audit differences. We've identified 9 unadjusted audit differences, which would increase the deficit on services by £369,000. We also identified an unadjusted prior year error, which is balance sheet error only, which is the revaluation reserve error I touched on earlier of £1.9 million. And the details of those are set on pages 20 to 22.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Page 18. It may be a venial question to the finance people in the room, but where it says related parties, councillors are not asked for declarations of interest annually, and we recommend that they consider that the practice should be done. We're asked for interests every meeting. So am I missing something here, or is this a different?
It's it's a different one. Whereas you're asked at every meeting to declare whether you've got any matters of interest in relation to items on the agenda. Best practices each year, councillors should be asked for all their potential related party interests. So it would include things like employment relationships, which may not be relevant to this meeting. So I'm just trying to think of a good example of one for you. Say you were trustee of a charity that gets money from the council. Yes. You wouldn't necessarily declare that every meeting, but you could, if you're not on a committee that it's relevant to, but if you're on a committee that was making grants, you would declare it.
So well, maybe I'm in the minority here, but I'm asked by Harlow Council and Essex County Council every year to declare that sort of thing. Yeah. Already.
I don't think we had all of them last year. That was, I'm trying to remember.
Okay. So what you're saying is not everyone did what they were asked to do, but councillors are asked to do that every year, and I fill it in every year.
Yeah, so do I.
So, you know, again, this is blurring the lines for me. It's saying that we should do it, and we are doing it. If we're not collecting everyone in, that's not down to me as a councillor. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I don't normally say an awful lot.
I'll double check. Can I double check, Councillor Johnson, what the issue was? Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, it's a genuine one for me, because I have to make sure everything I do is correct. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Maggie Holcoop.
You're on mute, Councillor.
think she's having the same trouble I had in trying to unmute.
Adam, are you able to unmute Maggie?
For you as host.
Perfect, you're done. You're unmuted. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Eddie, because when I saw this comment, I thought, well, we always have it after the local elections. We have to do the declaration of interest, ownership and everything else. And I wondered why it was repeated in different sections of this whole document, that the councillors are not doing the declaration of interest, but it's an annual thing that we do. And I think we've done one this year, because I remember Adam sending it out on email, and any changes had to be effectively sent back through. And I just assumed that all the councillors were doing the same thing. Thank you, Chair. I'm off again. Oh, a minute.
Sorry, I was trying to open the file while we were doing that. I'll come back on the related parties question.
The Zoom was coming up saying that I wasn't allowed to unmute myself. That's why I was desperately clicking. So I don't know, Adam, if you have clicked some function on that allows only you yourself to unmute and mute people. But we'll try and persevere on. I'll pass back to Francesca.
That's all right. I've just got open the audit file whilst I was doing this. Reading the file from what we did, and I have to say this was 15 months ago, so it's a little bit hazy. Some of the declarations, we didn't have declarations for some members who'd left during the year. So I think the recommendation is more around making sure that everybody has got a up-to-date declaration before they leave. So obviously people are now doing it every year. Things have improved since we did the audit work 15 months ago. I think that might be the answer.
Chair.
Councillor Perrin.
Yeah, I just I will want to come on to ask more questions later on, but I think on this one point, this is a public document and the tone of phrase, the grammar needs to be correct. And it's not a case of not being asked, it's a case of maybe the audit procedure around chasing councillors who haven't done it isn't robust. But it actually does, it says it here, it says not asked, which is just totally incorrect. And that does, it doesn't matter if you're doing it 15 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago, we've always been asked. The fact that some people don't do it is an entirely different way of phrasing the response. The officers do ask us, it actually is here, it does say, it says councillors are not asked. It doesn't say some councillors do not do it.
I think it says not asked every year.
Yeah, it says councillors are not asked for declarations of interest annually, but we are.
Looking at our file quickly,
yeah.
And I apologise, I am looking very quickly. Certainly for 5 or 6 councillors, we haven't got declarations made in 1819.
But that's a different point, isn't it? That means those councillors haven't done what they've been asked to do, but that's entirely different.
I'm not sure whether they've not been asked to do it or whether they haven't done it, but we've certainly got some where bearing in mind we're looking at 1819, the most recent declaration of 2017.
Francesca, I'll just say this one last thing then, right? We don't know. You've heard lots of councillors saying we are asked.
Yep.
This report contains very technical, financial, complex instruments of accounting. And we have to have confidence that what's being said is right. And on a simple matter of a basic, are you asked to fill out a form, it's not clear. How can we have confidence that what else is in there is very complicated? We can trust. That's the point, isn't it? This is the easiest bit of the report and it's wrong.
I was going to say, this is obviously based on what we were told at the time. So that's what we've got. So yeah, I'll take that away and discuss it further.
Do you have any more points to make on the report, Francesca, or should I open up the questions?
I was going to say, no, I have got some more points, I'm afraid.
Oh, lovely.
That's all right. So we just talked about the adjusted errors. We have also asked the council to reconsider their treatment of the HTS pension reserve in the group accounts, because currently it is shown as an unusable reserve. However, pensions reserves in the companies are considered to be profit and loss reserves and therefore should be treated as a usable reserve in group accounts. So that's a point which Rebecca and I are still discussing. The other point to pick up is fees. We will be asking for substantial increase in the fee due to the quality of working papers provided and the level of errors we found during our audit. Both of these issues mean that we've had to carry out a substantial amount of additional work that would not have been included in the scale fee. In addition, the PPAs have meant that we've needed to consultate internally to a sort of fairly high level with our technical teams, which also has a significant cost implication. We're planning to discuss this with Simon in the first instance and then report the additional requested fee in the annual audit letter, which should be presented to the next audit committee subject to the accounts being signed. The additional fee then also needs to be approved by PSAA before we can raise it. So I think that's sort of my fairly.
I think I'll ask the question there of what does significant mean?
I think that's a point that we need to discuss with Simon in the initial instance. Lisa's not here tonight, unfortunately, because she's got another audit committee. And I wouldn't want to commit the firm without talking to her first.
Okay. I'll hand back to you, Francesca, if there's more.
I was going to say, no, that was sort of the last part. And any more questions?
Okay, I open up to questions. Councillor Jean Clark.
Well, I hope I'm in the right area. One is on the question of fee. There are several questions actually. One relates to fees, which are here on page 38, but I haven't got it in front of me, and somewhere else. And I'm particularly interested in the non-audit area and whether it's necessary or not. I seem to recall at one point that they turned out to be double the amount that had been planned for. So it's often a great surprise, clearly. And a related issue, there was a long discussion about material uncertainties. I'm not sure where, but what I would call a scientization, there's no such word, of the word material, classifying it in different groups. And I just wondered why it's necessary to do all that. Things are either material or they're not material. And I noticed that it again creates extra work and extra fees in answering the issues. And is it really so necessary? That's one issue. And the whole question of fees.
Because I think Steve was trying to unmute himself as well, so I'm not quite sure.
I'm not muted. Am I muted?
No, Steve was.
Adam, could we try? Oh, no, he wasn't. He's shaking his head vigorously, so I'll pass back to Francesca. Oh.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't able to unmute myself, but it looks like I can now unmute myself. I don't know if it would help if I could try and take some of Councillor Clark's questions. So if perhaps I start on the non-audit fees. So they are primarily, well, they are wholly in relation to the work that we do on grant claims. So the council is required to submit a number of grant claims, and it is required to have an audit of those. So the two grant claims in question are the housing benefit subsidy audit and pooling of housing capital receipts. So as I say, the council is required to have those certified by an external auditor, and that's what those fees are in relation to.
Yeah.
I'll try and answer the point about materiality. So whenever, and this is primarily in relation to the statement of accounts, so whenever we give an opinion on a set of financial statements, we set a level of materiality at which we say those accounts give a true and fair view. So in simple terms, if the errors go above that level of materiality, we would say that those accounts do not give a true and fair view. And at that point, the council would either need to do one of two things. Well, firstly, it would certainly need to adjust the errors that we have identified, but we would also need to do additional testing to make sure there aren't similar errors that would push the level of error above that materiality.
But does that need, do you need to have a sort of a whole hierarchy of levels, is the point I'm really making, that you can, that I see what you're saying. If you've got a misstatement, as it's called, apparently, then you've got to address it if it's a serious issue. But
so under auditing standards, we're required to give an opinion on whether those accounts present true and fair view. And we do that by setting a level of materiality, and we measure all errors against that level of materiality.
Okay. So it's all got to be done.
Do you want me to pass? Simon Freeman, I'll pass over to.
Thanks, Chair. I just feel that I probably need to make a few comments following the auditor's presentation. So I absolutely agree with comments made earlier that, you know, there are, in terms of monetary values, there have been some significant movements in the accounts as a result of the audit. I think we've consistently said at previous meetings when we've been updating on the position of the 18-19 accounts that on the whole, the majority of the adjustments that have been discussed with the auditors and have been made and represented in the accounts that are in front of the committee this evening, albeit they're still subject to some ongoing audit work, are essentially of a technical nature. And the areas that we have been looking at with the auditors are particularly complex, and particularly around the what's referred to as PPE, property, plant and equipment, effectively the assets that the council holds, and the way that we account for those and reflect them in the accounts themselves. And just in terms of context, I think if within the accounts that are presented this evening, the council holds assets to the value of nearly £900 million, to give some context to the values that we hold and are reflected in the accounts tonight. And I think clearly in some instances, I think we have experienced a different view on the accounts with the change from our old auditors to our new auditors. Now, I'm not saying one's wrong and one's right, but you have been presented in previous years with reports from previous auditors that have concluded that some of these issues have been represented fairly and consistently within the accounts. And then tonight, and as part of the report that BDO are presenting to you, they have identified that, in their opinion, there are technical issues that go back into prior years. But as an audited body, we have had previous audit opinions and audit results reports that have not drawn these issues to our attention. So I just think it's important that you are aware of that as a committee. Clearly, as these things have been raised with us, and I think there are three key areas that you ought to be aware of, and I think Francesca has mentioned this evening. One is about the assets that we hold as a council and the way we treat them and account for them. One is about pensions, and one has been about our treatment of debtors and creditors in the accounts. They're the three real main areas that this report draws attention to. And equally on the pensions issue, it was an issue that we dealt with our previous auditors and had agreed a position on the pensions treatment for HTS. Unfortunately, having made all of those entries in our accounts, The pension fund then refused to allow us to treat it in the way that we'd agreed with our auditors. Now, that might sound quite straightforward on the face of it, but actually the adjustments that has created in restating the accounts to represent them in a different way have been exceptionally complicated and have taken some time to work through with the auditors. The McLeod issue that Francesca raised, again, if the audit had not been ongoing, McLeod issues would not have been reflected in the accounts. They'd have been reflected in the 1920 accounts. But we have agreed to deal with that in 1819, and we have worked our way through that so that substantially when the next audit takes place, that issue will have been dealt with and will be reflected correctly in the council's accounts that are presented to you. Hoping that will be in March, as the audit for 1920 is planned to take place in January and February next year. And we will represent those issues in the way that we've now agreed with the auditors. I think just finally, I know there's reference in the report before you tonight about the quality of working papers. I think we've all learned over the last 15 months that there have been some issues on both sides of the fence, as there always are in these matters. And I think it would be wrong to leave the committee with a view that all blame lies with the council. I think there have been some teething issues with the way that we work with our new auditors. There was a very different way of working in terms of working papers and how they're presented and how they are posted and sent to effectively the auditors. Debtors and creditors as an example, there's a criticism that we provided a full list of everything, not just the year-end adjustments that they were looking for. We provided it in the way that we provided it to previous auditors, and clearly there's a difference in the way that it's now required. We understand that now, and we will deal with it differently for future years. So I just think it's important to try and give a bit more of a balanced view here. I don't want the councillors leaving the committee tonight thinking all is doom and gloom and we don't know what we're doing. I don't think that's the case at all. I think there have been some particular technical issues that I think both sides have struggled with, actually, to be fair. Our auditors have had to consult back with technical experts as well. So I just wanted to make those few points just to try and give some reassurance, and the fact that clearly that there is some recommendations in this report tonight about how things can be improved. And we're already talking with Steve as the new lead auditor about how we can make that work better during the process in January and February of this year, and the way that we'll work together and communicate between both the council and the audit team to make sure that issues are dealt with quickly and efficiently, and things don't drag on as they have over the past 15 months for the 18-19 financial year. And it would be remiss of me, actually, I should have done it at the beginning of the meeting, forgive me, Chair, but Rebecca Keane is present this evening. You won't have met Rebecca before, but Rebecca is our new Principal Finance Manager, has replaced John Dyson, and we share effectively Rebecca with Broxbourne Council. So she's part-time with us and part-time with Broxbourne. But just for the purposes of introducing Rebecca to the meeting this evening, I thought I ought to do that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, Jean.
Yes, could I just follow up? I assumed that I was grateful for that description, actually, and discussion. One of the issues I was going to raise was the question of the HTS. It's nothing to worry about, Simon. Pensions reserves, where the auditors seem to regard it as usable reserves, and the council, and I agree with the council, I think it's very important, in fact, regards them as unusable. How did that end up, please?
It's still in discussion at the moment, Jean. I'm of the opinion that we really need to get these things done and finished. And if we agree to what the auditors are asking for 18-19, there will be further work to be done and further notes to be included in the account. So I need to have a discussion with Francesca, and I know that Rebecca is already having those discussions, but my preference would be to recognise that there is a difference of opinion for 18-19, and if we need to make any changes to that representation, then we do it in the 1920 accounts and we move on.
Right, I've got questions from Councillor Carter and Councillor Perrin. I'll take Councillor Carter first.
Thank you, Chair. On page 19 of the report, I have to use the report page numbers because the agenda page numbers are all over the place. It says unadjusted audit differences summary. We are required to bring to your attention unadjusted differences and we request that you correct them. At the time of writing, we have identified and agreed 9 unadjusted audit differences as a result of our work. The general fund balance would decrease by £389,000 if these audit differences were adjusted. Whereabouts in the general fund will that appear?
So if I could just respond to that, Chair. So
Absolutely.
in the management letter representation that will be completed once we finalise the audit work, I will not be making those adjustments in the accounts at this point in time. And the main issue with the figures that have been produced in the report, which identify the £369,000 that Councillor Carter has just referred to, I think if you look at the table, and I can't remember the page number, I think it might be 22. Yeah, it's 21 and 22. They actually rely on extrapolations that have been made from testing in the accounts, and I would not ordinarily make adjustments to the accounts for anything that's been based on an extrapolation.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Carter?
Not really, but carry on.
Councillor Perrin,
Sorry, Chair, I have quite a number of questions, if I may.
You may.
Thank you. Well, it's more a comment. Page 27, adjusted audit differences current year. There is a comment there about amending incorrect accounting treatment for receipts in advance, 2.65 million. I seem to recall that accounting trick was what did for Tesco's and Carillion. Now, I presume that's being put right. I.e. is being posted in the correct year.
Yeah.
Yes, they've been adjusted, Councillor Carter, and they will be picked up and dealt with in a consistent way in future years.
Page 34, significant deficiencies. There are 3 lines picked up there, one of which is manual adjustments were made to the PPE entries which were not made to the PPE accounting system. So I'm wondering what improvements are now in place to prevent the recurrence of these mistakes for the 1920 accounts.
So I hope that our auditor colleagues will support this comment, but there's been an extensive amount of work done as a result of the audit and subsequent to that in terms of working on the system, which you will be familiar with from previous reports to the committee, our system called Technology Forge. So a significant amount of work has been done to ensure that the system records can be reconciled to the financial accounts.
Yes, I'll support that comment. And that actually drives, there's a £400,000 adjustment which came about as a result of this, and the work that the team have done now to explain and reconcile those balances for us.
So the point appears to be that adjustments were being made in one system which were not being copied over to the general ledger. Now, why wouldn't you do that?
Simon.
So yeah, I can't remember which way around it was, Councillor Carter, actually on this evening, but I think it was the other way around, that the auditors couldn't trace the values in the accounts to the actual values in the system.
You mean in Aggresso?
Which we've now reconciled and agreed moving forward that we have a process for doing that.
So an improvement has been made to your processes to avoid it?
Yes. we've actually had the system providers work with us to bring all of the records up to date and to undertake that reconciliation piece.
Right. From what Ms. Palmer was saying earlier, there are still some adjustments to be done, which will result in another set of annual accounts being produced. Is that correct?
I'll hand over to Francesca if you'd like to just update the committee on those final bits.
Yes,
Francesca.
we've got, when we did our internal consistency reviews, we've got some minor inconsistencies where the notes don't quite agree to the face of the account, to the main accounting statements, which are back with the council for review, just to confirm which entry is correct. But I'm not expecting, so there'll be minor presentational changes to the accounts, but I'm not expecting there to be anything significant coming out of that.
And I think I'm right in saying, Francesca, that some of that is related to the fact that we've corrected entries into the accounts to align with the audit work, but we haven't necessarily followed up in every instance with the corresponding note.
Yes, I think that's probably what's happened. So it's a case of just waiting for those responses to come back from the council to say, actually, yes, the number on the face of the CIS, for example, is right. The note hasn't been updated to match what the change you've made to the face of the CIS.
Finally, I mentioned earlier about the changes to the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, which is quite a big document. Virtually every line on the CIS has changed. Now, Mr. Freeman referred earlier, well, these are explained by the issues that you're talking to. In the sort of 24 hours since I've received these documents, it's not been possible to track those back. And it might be helpful if an annotation or a separate sheet could be provided explaining why each of the, which aspect of the audit has resulted in those values changing. Because I say virtually every single number on that statement has changed.
Simon or Francesca?
Yeah, I mean, what we can do, Councillor Carter, is we can, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on it, given that our focus must be now to move through to the 1920 audit and get that process complete in a reasonable time frame. But I'm sure if we look back at the papers that have been produced to support the audit work, we will be able to provide a reconciliation, probably not to the exact pound, but certainly to quite a significant degree as to what those movements have been caused by. And as you know, there are big movements created by the pensions adjustments and the PPE adjustments. There's no doubt about that, and they filter through and have that impact. So we'll do our best without tying the team up in too long a process to get that, but I'm sure we can do the majority of that for members of the committee.
Does that answer some of your questions, Councillor Carter?
Yes, thank you.
I will pass over to Councillor Perrin and then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions. First of all, going to the report on page 7, it says, and this is a question to Francesca, the council has also been unable to provide us with evidence that a robust review of financial statements was carried out prior to the authorisation of the draft accounts. For what reason was the evidence not forthcoming? Did it not exist, the processes, or was there a blocker there?
When we asked for it, we didn't get anything. Normally, we'll often get a set of accounts that's been marked up by whoever's reviewed it, showing the questions they've asked and things.
Okay, so you didn't get anything, you just didn't get an answer?
Yeah, we weren't provided any evidence that it happened.
Right.
So I can't answer whether it was evidence.
So the message, the question goes to Simon Freeman then. Why was there Why wasn't there a response?
If I may, Chair, I can't give you a factual answer to that, Councillor Perrin. I think the fact of the matter was we lost our principal finance manager in the April as we were producing the accounts, and that limited our ability to carry out some of the detailed review that would normally be conducted prior to publication of the draft accounts. So whilst we will have undertaken a high level review, it probably isn't to the degree that the auditors will be expecting, and that will be corrected moving forward for 1920.
Okay.
I think we had in previous years actually improved on that aspect of our accounts production, and the number of errors that had been picked up had reduced significantly as a result of it. I think it's just unfortunately one of those circumstances where we were short of the appropriate staff to carry out that work, and it didn't get done as thoroughly as it would have done otherwise.
Okay, is there a wider question then about succession planning within the organisation? And is that something that perhaps our audit process should be picking up on? I'm looking at Sarah Marsh, because if somebody leaves, the organisation should be robust enough to deal with somebody leaving. Is there a bigger problem at play here?
I mean, I think to be fair, Councillor Perrin, the actual individual that left, I personally hadn't been expecting it. I mean, normally with these things, you get an inclination that somebody's planning to leave or they're looking for alternative employment. And we literally had the 3 months notice and no more that the individual was going to be leaving the authority. And in the time that it actually happened, probably couldn't have been a worse time, to be honest, as you're heading up to the end of year. It's very difficult. We did try to go out to recruit, but at that point, anybody that's kind of normally looking for those kind of jobs are pretty much tied up with doing that work at their own authority and aren't looking to move generally. So the actual market for replacements was very difficult. And I take the point on board. And I think in terms of the work that I'll be doing with Rebecca, now that she's in post, we're already looking at how we can make process and skills improvements across
more
the team.
Resilient, yeah. Okay, thank you. I suppose then that does lead on to the question I wanted to ask Sarah, really, because it says that there are significant deficiencies in our internal controls. Is there something missing in our internal audit systems that aren't allowing us to pick up on these things sooner? I suppose is the question I want to ask.
So when they're talking about the internal controls, they're talking about the production of the statement of accounts and the flaws there have been in that. So it's not an area that we would audit because we have the external auditors doing that. But
okay.
Yeah, we'll
Fine.
be asking some questions.
Sure. Just a question back to Francesca again, if I may. We're talking about on page 5, some big numbers, some big adjustments there. Mr. Freeman said that this is part of a transition from one auditor to another, and actually some of these adjustments have come about because of different procedures and ways of reporting things. In your experience, when you've come in to audit a large organisation and there's been a change of auditors, do you experience adjustments of this order, this magnitude? Is it usual to get this kind of discrepancy?
I think I haven't done that many audits where I've come in as a new audit firm into an audit. I think I'd say it's unusual. You might get 1 or 2. The number we've got here is larger than we would be expecting.
Okay, thank you. I won't take up too much of the committee's time, Chair. I do just have a couple more questions though. On the recommendations on page 33, where it says management response to the recommendation, a number of them say to be confirmed, and a number of them have a double X next to it. And just really, what does the double X mean? Does that mean you haven't had any response at all? And the TBC, why are we still waiting for us to confirm whether we're going to take on recommendations that have highlighted significant problems in the way we do things?
Okay, so I'll take this. The double X and the TBC are the same.
All right, okay.
I was just being inconsistent, for which I apologise.
Not kisses.
Pardon? No,
I said not
Yeah.
kisses. Is
not
it?
kisses.
And so
the
second question was,
the way of picking things up.
yeah, the second question was about why have we not, as a council, decided whether we're going to take on board these recommendations or not?
It's still a draft report.
No, I mean that's the council, isn't it? The management response.
It is, but I'm not sure the council have had.
Oh, I think Francesca's frozen.
Just, I imagine Simon Freeman might answer that, because that's something the council would decide, isn't it?
It is, Councillor Perrin, yes. And once the report has been finalised, we will produce a management response to those points. And I suppose just picking up on some of the comments I made earlier, we either have already or we are in the process of dealing with the issues that have been raised.
Okay, so final two questions then. Whose decision, and you're probably going to say it was this committee's, but I don't remember doing it. Whose decision was it to switch auditors? And what was the reason for that?
This committee is because it was a full service. We made that decision about 18 months, 2 years ago.
Okay, I don't remember us making that decision. So I suppose, do we think it was worth it?
So can I just maybe just make a comment there, Stefan? I think the decision that the committee took was to take part in the national procurement several years ago for the appointment of the auditors. And periodically, auditors do change. It's quite common for that to happen. But again, the appointment is made through the public sector auditor appointments body. And we elected as a committee to be part of that process. So that was the decision the committee took, not the decision specifically for the particular company.
Yeah, I could say I don't remember picking a particular company.
No.
Do we think the process was worth it in the end?
Can I reserve my response to that question until maybe 2 years' time?
Okay, fair enough. All from me for now.
Past Steve, is it Bladen? Or
it is, it's Bladen, yeah.
Bladen, did you want to come in? I did see you had your hand up.
Yeah, can I, if it's okay, Chair, if I could just perhaps come back on a couple of points that have been made. So firstly, I think it was Councillor Carter's points about the reconciliation of the changing numbers between the draft accounts that I believe you saw some time ago and the accounts that are before you now. It's really just to say that at the foot of page 29, underneath the adjusted errors, there is a total that shows what the change is in the net expenditure of the council. So I think it changes by about 30 million, and the sum of those errors that are on pages 26, 27, 28 and 29 are those reconciling adjustments. But I'm sure Simon can use that in providing whatever reconciliation he wants to do that to you. To a couple of the points about the to be confirmed and the X's, and perhaps the point about the related party transactions, what we would do is, alongside the audit opinion that we give on the accounts, we will issue a final version of our audit completion report, and we'll pick up those minor changes within that final version of it. And I think I just wanted to come back on the point that Councillor Clark made about the pensions and the usable reserves, and Simon's point about picking that up in 1920. I think I just wanted to be clear that for us, that is a material issue, and it is one that we would be looking to resolve in 1819. So we're happy to have a further conversation with Simon and Rebecca about that, but it is something that we would want to resolve in 1819, not carry it over to 1920.
Is it not an issue that councillors could decide?
Well, ultimately, it's our opinion on the accounts. So I think it's something that we need to discuss with officers, and officers, I assume, would advise members on their view on that. But ultimately, it's our opinion on the accounts, and we need to satisfy ourselves that the accounts prepared by the council go back again to give a true and fair view.
Thank you, Steve. Can I bring in Councillor Johnson for his question?
Thank you. Well, between Councillor Perrin and Steve Blading, I think they've destroyed my question. Basically, they've answered it. What's the double X mean? It means to be confirmed. Fair enough, and that means it's given the council the chance to reply. But on number 4 on page 35, it actually goes on to say the council should obtain updated declarations of interest at the end of every financial year. So now we've moved on from page 18 and we've got it right and said we should obtain them, not that we're not filling them in. But what I think is a very good idea is if when all officers and when a councillor stands down, make sure they fill one in, because then we don't have any undisclosed related parties, and the forms are up to date. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eddie. Councillor Johnson, sorry. Councillor Holcoop. She's now having the fun with the mute button again. Adam, could you assist Maggie in unmuting again, please?
I think she's frozen.
There she is. You're fine. We can hear you.
Right, unmute. Stay.
You are unmuted, Maggie. We can hear you.
I'm clear. Right. We're going forward when we've done the 1819. We've got COVID, and we've got all sorts of stuff that is going to be different this year from any other year we've ever had audits. And as a councillor, how we put the financial aspects through. Are we secure as a council and as auditors that the cohesion between the two groups is going to be there? Because what's happened in 1819 has been remedied, so that we go forward with a very positive outlook on how we're both going to go into the audit for 1920, because this year is going to be messed up anyway. And we need to be clear that we're going forward in a very positive and strong way, and we both sides know what we're doing with it and how we're going to get there. Thank you, Chair.
Maggie, can I hold your question for the next bit of the agenda, which where we'll be discussing the next audit after
Muted.
So I'm going to hold that question in reserve until we get on to the next bit of the agenda, and I'll ask you to ask it again because I think it's a very relevant question for the next bit of the agenda, Maggie.
Okay, shall I? Right, okay. I'm not muting.
Yeah. I had a similar one.
Oh, well. Oh, I've got a mute.
Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
Thank you, Councillor John. Have we got any more questions? I will move on to comments. Go Councillor Perrin, then Councillor Carter to mix it up a bit.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate, for what it's worth, the these are very complex and complicated things, and working together with people on complicated things like this for the first time can be quite testing. But that said, it is very disappointing to read this report. It's disappointing to hear that these kinds of variances are unusually exceptional. It's disappointing to hear that we've not thought properly about succession planning in an organisation, because whether people give us notice to leave or not, accidents happen as well, and we need to be prepared for that. That said, I'm equally disappointed that some of the minor stuff, as we talked about earlier with councillors not being asked annually to register their interests, is coming across as slightly misleading, or if not misleading, incorrect, not technically so. And so it leaves one thinking, well, how much weight can you put behind what's been said? And so really you're left generally with a not too confident feeling about what's going on here at the moment. And I only hope that we can, as a council, sort these differences out, move on, and actually improve our systems, and hopefully they'll be more future-proof. Because if we change auditors again for whatever reason, I'd hate to think we were doing this all again with the same kind of results in a few months' time. So whilst I appreciate people are working very hard in difficult situations, I have to be honest and say that this has probably been the least edifying experience in a committee I've had in a very long time. So I'm not warm inside when I read it and I hear what I hear. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Perrin. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. We've spent the last, well, at least the last hour, going through a litany of problems and difficulties and errors with producing these accounts. They were approved in September last year, and here we are 14, 15 months later with the accounts come back. Mr. Freeman said, well, the accounts have been available for, well, probably the last year, but we've only just seen the auditor's report yesterday. And, just as it's complicated and difficult for you, it's even more complicated and difficult for us to actually read through this and try and understand what's going on and come back and ask questions to get them clarified. Now, I have asked, what steps have been taken and agreed to improve this. One of the issues that came across was the apparent lack of response to some queries when Mr. Freeman explained, well, they'd sent all of the invoices instead of the year-end invoices because that's what they'd always done. The question is, did you read the question? What was it that BDO actually asked for? There's a litany of errors and confusion. Yes, I agree. There are some quite complex ones, such as the HDS pension fund, which seems to have been running ever since HDS was set up. And I agree that is difficult. But then we go down to the fees that Councillor Clark was talking about. An additional 13,000 for the housing benefits subsidy claim for the additional testing as a result of errors found. Now, this seems, taken together, this seems to be, a lack of control coming in. Now, John Dyson left in March last year, and it's only now in November the following year that replacement has been found. Why has it taken this long to find replacement? As I said at the beginning, I'm not happy signing this off, and I would move that the report be or the response be deferred, or the recommendation be deferred for a month or so until these outstanding errors can be corrected. We can actually get the right numbers in the annual return, so we know what it is we're dealing with. And as I said, a brief summary as to why the numbers on the CIS have changed so much. Mr. Bladen said the figure on page 29 about the adjusted differences of 30.8 million. Well, I'm afraid that's not a number I recognise on the CIS. It's not aggregation. Different, because the numbers are broken down in a different way, it's not easy to relate to which particular error or adjustment applies to which particular line. That's what I'm looking for. Now, you, the collective you, have had 15 months to do this. We've had 24 hours. And I think it's totally unreasonable that we should be expected to, laymen, councillors, should be expected to turn this around in 24 hours when, all we're presented with is a whole raft of errors, corrections, adjustments, explanations, and so forth. So I say, I'm going to move that we defer it until 1 month or 2 months until we can actually get some answers and some proper numbers.
I would second that, Chair.
Could I ask Simon for his view, or Simon Freeman, his view and implications of that, please?
I'm not going to give a definitive answer tonight, Chair, on the basis that until I take it away in terms of the request that Councillor Carter's made and make an assessment of how much time it will take, I'm not going to give an answer on that tonight. On the basis that, we've got another audit looming in approximately 8 weeks' time, and I can't afford to tie the team up on a piece of work to reconcile a 15-month-old set of accounts with the set that's in front of the committee tonight. If that's something that's quite straightforward to do, then we will produce it. But I would want to come back to you as the chair of the committee. If that's going to take us, a number of days to do, I think I have to make a judgment about where resources are best placed at the moment moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Well, Chair, I was going to raise a similar point. We're moving on to an entirely new situation. There's plenty of work to be done. We've got to consider whether we're even a going concern in the future. So I don't think I would rather personally although I agree with a lot of what Simon has said, I'd rather put it down to experience, and he can follow up his individual queries. But I don't think I can stand sitting through another whole meeting really even further away from the original time. Once is enough, thank you, Chair, as far as I'm concerned.
I am of a Simon Freeman.
Yeah, all I can really do, Chair, is give the committee the assurances that we have taken on board the comments that have been made by our auditors, and we have made significant changes and improvements in terms of the working practices around particularly assets. I think and I hope that the auditors would concur with me that the issue with the pensions is pretty much a one-off issue in terms of making that treatment reflect correctly in the accounts at the point of incorporating into our consolidated group accounts. We've now done that. We've agreed the way forward on it. Those adjustments won't be needed again. It is a one-off exercise that we've done, and it was a learning process, I think, for everybody. We'd not consolidated group accounts previously as a local authority, and we've now gone through that process, and I think I've got an agreed position on that with our incoming and ongoing auditors. So I'm pretty content that we're in a significantly better place with both the assets and the pensions issues, and they are effectively the two key issues that have created the majority of the content of the report that's before the committee tonight.
Thank you. I realise that we have actually got a motion and a seconder on the table which needs to be resolved. Does anyone want to talk to that point? I see Eddie Johnson, Councillor Johnson has his hand up in the chat participants window. Does he still want to contribute on this point?
Unfortunately, I can't because I needed to take a comfort break, so I've missed the motion. But what I was going to say to Councillor Clark was, as frustrating as it is, Councillor Clark, and I'm frustrated because I'm not a professional on this either, I think it's prudent that we do the right thing. And if that means taking more time, we should do that. But anyway, if someone could just, sorry, I do apologise for my tardiness, but if someone could inform me of the motion so that I'm informed.
I will pass back to Simon to repeat what he suggested. Simon Carter, Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. That we defer signing off or recommending the annual accounts for 2 months pending clarification of the outstanding issues, the correct numbers going into the annual accounts, and a timetabled programme of improvements from Mr. Freeman on the process moving forward. I also asked for a annotated explanation to the numbers on the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. It doesn't need to be detailed, but just a number as to which of the errors the adjustment refers to, because virtually all the numbers on that table have changed, and some quite substantially. We were given reassurances in September last year that the outstanding issues will be dealt with and signed off by the Section 151 officer and the chair of the committee. And here we are 15 months later, and we're still no further forward. So again, we need some reassurance as to when all these outstanding issues are going to be resolved. And in relation, sorry, this is not part of the motion. It also sort of ties in with a later item on the agenda about the audit plan for next year.
So I do
3 months.
I do feel very sorry for Adam Rees, who now has to write down all of that as the motion.
YouTube, can't he?
I think I share Councillor Clark's view, which is firstly, this power was already dissolved before to the Section 105 officer and myself. It was brought back because there was such a lengthy delay on it. I do agree with Councillor Clark, and I'm worried that if we do push this back for 2 months, we will be then impinging on the next audit, and we will have the same kind of problem going forward in the future as well. So I won't be voting for the motion on the table, but I will put the motion and put it to a vote now. So all those in favour of Councillor Carter's motion, please raise your hand. I've got 4. All those against, please raise your hand. And I've got 5 against. Any abstentions? I don't know why I asked for abstentions. There's only 9 members of the committee, so that hasn't carried. I will now move to the recommendations on page 1 of the supplementary report. Recommendation A and recommendation B. All those in favour? I make that 5. All those against? 4. That is carried. And recommendations on page 130. A and B. All those in favour?
Hang on, got to find it first.
Agenda item 11. Recommendation A reviews the audit result report alongside the approval of the statement of accounts reported to the meeting and notes the value for money assessment of the council's use of the resources as contained within the attached report to the council's appointed auditor. All those in favour? I made that 5. All those against? 4. We have that is carried as well, 5-4. Thank you so much, BDO and Francesca, for presenting that report, and thank you, officers, for answering some questions. I will now hand over for agenda item 12, the external audit plan for this year, and pass over to Steve Bladen from BDO.
Chair, before I start, just two things really. Firstly, I was going to ask, as we've now moved on to 1920, would it be okay if Francesca left the meeting?
She is absolutely fine to leave the meeting. I'm sure she has nicer places to be. So thank you, Francesca. You are free to go.
Thank you.
And before I start on the 1920 audit plan, I thought I should perhaps just introduce myself to members as well. So I joined BDO as a director back in January of this year, and I will be taking forward the 1920 audit from Lisa Clampin. So Lisa was your previous partner who will sign the opinion on the 1819 accounts, and I'll take over from 1920. I think what I plan to do is just take you through the 1920 audit planning report, and essentially this just sets out how we propose to undertake our 1920 audit. So I will assume the document has been read, and I'm just going to focus on the key points, but obviously I'm happy to take any questions once I've gone through those. To start with, I would direct members to page 5 of our report, where we've set out the level of materiality for the audit, and we have set that at 1.9 million. So that's broadly similar to what it was for 2018-19. We've calculated that on the basis of the council's gross expenditure, and we do that because our view is that gross expenditure is a key area of focus for the users of the financial statements. We've set our clearly trivial level at £38,000. So what that means is that any errors that we find that are over £38,000, we will report those to you in our audit completion report once we've completed our audit. I did just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the risks that we've identified. You will see that they are very similar to the ones that we identified in 2018-19, but I will just take you through those because I think they're the key areas of focus for members. So the first of those is the management override of controls. So this is a risk that we would include in all audit plans that we prepare for local authorities, and in fact auditors would include it in any audit plan that they prepare for any entity. So the risk essentially recognises that management is in a unique position to potentially override controls that are in place and present a favourable financial position to the council. For the council. So we address that risk in a number of ways, but primarily it's through our testing of journal entries, so how management can transfer amounts between headings within the general ledger, so we will test those. We look at estimates that have been made by management, and we test significant transactions as well. For a council, we will also test a sample of additions to both, well, in particular, non-current assets, so property, plant and equipment, and just make sure that that expenditure has been classified correctly within the financial statements. So the second significant risk that we would identify is in relation to revenue recognition. Now that risk focuses on whether income and expenditure has been recognised in the correct accounting period. And we address that risk really through our substantive testing of income and expenditure transactions. So we will sample test both income and expenditure that's included within the financial statements. And what we're looking to do is just make sure that that expenditure has been recorded in the correct period. So is it disclosed in the correct financial year? Third significant risk is around valuation of property assets. So we've identified that as a significant risk, partly because of the issues we identified in 2018-19, but also because there's a high degree of judgment used in valuing those assets, and so some uncertainty as to the value of those assets. So in addressing that risk, we'll do a number of things. We'll look at the work of the valuer appointed by the council to value those assets. We'll make sure that those assets have been valued on a correct basis. and we'll review the information that underpins the way in which the valuer has come up with those values. So we'd look at for floor plans, for example. We'll look at the way the assets are being used, and we'll look at the amount of money that's been spent on the upkeep of those assets during the particular year. We also use indices to compare the value of those assets against what your valuer has come up, and we'll test whether the valuation of those assets or the change in the value of those assets has been accounted for correctly. What I did want to do just as early as I can really is just highlight that within our auditor's report, we are likely to issue an emphasis of matter opinion. And what that will do is it will draw attention to the valuation of the property assets. So what that does is it reflects that at the end of March 2020, there was limited information available to valuers on the effect of COVID-19 on property valuations. Now, the council's not alone in that. Most of the audit opinions that we're issuing in relation to 2019-20 are carrying those emphasis of matter opinions, and most auditors who audit local government accounts where there are substantial property holdings are doing that as well. The final significant risk we've identified is in relation to the pension fund. Again, that's primarily not because of the issues last year, because we think they are largely resolved, but it's still has a large degree of estimation uncertainty attached to it. So in addressing that risk, we will look at the work that's undertaken by the auditor for Essex Pension Fund, and we'll rely on the assurances that they give us around that. So that's the significant risks we've identified for the financial statements. We are also required to give a value for money conclusion, which looks at the way the council uses the resources available to it. So we've identified one significant risk in relation to that assessment, and that relates to the way in which the council prepares its financial statements. So again, that risk is looking back to 2018-19 and recognising that there was a number of issues that we've already commented on and control deficiencies that we've identified. Now, what we do recognise is that the council's undertaken a significant number of steps to strengthen its processes. So we've already spoken about the improvements around accounting for fixed assets or PPE, and appointing new staff to oversee the preparation of the financial statements. But what we'll do is we'll look and assess the extent to which those have been successful. Page 26 sets out details of our independence, and I can confirm to you that we're not aware of anything that would impact on our ability to undertake an independent audit. And finally, just dropping back into the report a little bit, but on page 7, I would just highlight there that we've set out details of what our audit fees are there. Appreciate that's quite a quick canter through quite a long document, but obviously happy to take any questions that members might have on the detail of the plan.
Lovely, thank you, Steve. I'll bring in Councillor Hulkig first with the question that I asked her to reserve from the previous agenda item.
Am I working?
Yes, you are working, Maggie.
Good, good, good.
And you've now muted, Maggie.
Chair, I think I can answer the question if...
Yes. I've got Councillor Hulkig's agreement, that's fine.
Heard it.
So I'll try and answer the question.
You tell us the question as well.
So the question is, given the kind of COVID pandemic and the issues that we've had in the prior year, how are we going to ensure that we work together with the council to make sure that this audit is much smoother? Yes,
sorry, it's also mine.
So I think there's a number of aspects to that. So firstly, I think we will be confident that the opening balances are correct, and we won't be reviewing previous judgments that have been taken, because the judgments that have gone into the prior year accounts are all of our own and we are satisfied with them. So I think that will help. I've already discussed a number of practical steps with Simon and Rebecca, just in terms of how we can share information, and we do have a new system that's available to us that I think will make that a lot smoother in terms of all of the sharing of information can now be done electronically, and everyone can see what everyone else has got access to. So there is no question of stuff being emailed between people. It will all be on a portal that everyone can see. And we've already agreed that one of the things that we do need going forwards is much more regular meetings where we can flag issues that we're having. So Simon and I have already had a number of conversations, but we will be having further meetings before Christmas in the run up to us starting our 1920 audit in January. And once that audit is underway, Rebecca, Simon and I will be having weekly meetings to track progress as we go through the audit, which will make sure that where we're getting blockages in terms of the information available to us, they're being dealt with promptly, but also that we can flag issues that we're finding as we audit the accounts.
Thank you, Steve. I'll pass back to Simon Carter. Pass back, Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate something that Councillor Clark said about the earlier report, and that's the size of the print. The council itself has a standard of Arial 12 point. There are various bodies would actually recommend 14 point to cover most eventualities. It's not a complaint just to you. We made the same point to your predecessors, but certainly getting these reports in small print and trying to read them on a tablet is not going to win you friends and influence people. You know, and even when it's printed out, it's still very small. So if you could try a little bit harder in future to make it at least 12 points, that would be tremendously helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I think that opinion is shared across the whole committee. So yeah, I echo that. But
okay, but I will note that, Chair, and make sure that we increase the font size going forwards.
Thank you. Any more questions? Any comments? Okay, bear with me because I accidentally closed my agenda on my tablet, which is never sensible. Right, going back to the recommendations then on page. Are the recommendations after it? Sorry, bear with me. I'm lost myself in the agenda a bit. Give me 2 seconds. Is it just for noting, Simon? Sorry.
Yes, essentially.
Yep.
Okay. Do we note?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saving my blushes there, everybody. Right, on to, I believe, Steve, you are not needed for the next 2 bits of the agenda. So you are free to go if you would like to, and also the same for Rebecca as well. I realise this has been quite a long meeting, so please, if you have a better thing to do or anything else to do, please excuse yourself for the rest of the meeting. Okay, on to agenda item 13.
Unlucky for some.
Not saying that your parts of the agenda, Sarah, aren't important and well worth listening to.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is our usual progress report. So we're reporting on 2 reports that we've issued since our last meeting. The first one was a very big audit that we did across the council on data retention and disposals. So overall, we do have a framework in place, but there is a need to strengthen it and to revisit it. We had put it in place ready for the GDPR implementation date of the 25th of May 2018, which was ingrained on my brain when we were doing all of that. So we do have policies and procedures. I just want to assure audit committee members that, and we have something called registers of processing activities. So all the data that we handle across the council is contained within these ROPAs, these registers of processing activities, and we just need to revisit those and make sure that we're adhering to our retention schedule, which we have in place. We have a newly appointed data protection officer, and she's been absolutely fantastic. She's taken on board all our recommendations and pushing forward the information governance agenda. She's been talking to departments, giving them advice, and also arranging training where that has been needed. Also, we ourselves as internal audit, we've been facilitating discussions about disposals of paper documents. We have processes across the council of getting rid of this, but we had one particular area that had accumulation of paper, and by talking with facilities and looking at how we did that at Broxbourne and Epping, we've coming to an agreement on how that's going to happen going forward. There's so much work going on in the background since the audit. It's been really pleasing to see. And all this has been overseen by the Information Governance Group, which is chaired by the Head of Governance and reports into the Corporate Governance Group. So it was, so the message there is that we have some inconsistencies of the way we deal with this across the council, but we're now addressing it, and it's coming very high up on the agenda. The next report that we have is the Parks and Landscapes one. So this is the service provided by HTS. We've given it a split assurance there because we looked at the grounds maintenance, we're giving it moderate assurance, and then we've given it a limited assurance on the tree service. So what's happened with the tree service is that we've been mainly reactive rather than proactive, and that we do need to have a planned schedule of works. So HCS and the council have been looking into this about the tree works, and they have put in an action plan. They had done that before we started the audit, and they had, and they've done a lot of work on it. So they had 57 outstanding issues to do with tree works, and they've managed to already get that down to 39 since we started the audit. The grounds maintenance side, so HCS is delivering a service. They are doing what they said they're going to do in their contract, but the makeup of the town has really moved on since the Keir Harlow days when the ground maintenance used to take place. And it's a time now we need to make sure we have those discussions between the council and HCS to make sure we do have a programme that's fit for purpose. And what's helped is that the council have taken on a person who's worked in this industry previously. She started in January, and those discussions are taking place between the council and HCS. And actually, when we had the closing meeting where we brought both parties together, when they're talking anyway, there was a common consensus of the need to move forward and to improve the service jointly. So that was pleasing to see. Moving down through the report. So under the ongoing audit work, I wanted to bring to the audit committee's attention that we did interview, or we did have 3 candidates for the position of independent person on the audit committee. Unfortunately, none of them were sufficiently met the criteria that was in the person's specification, and the plan is to go out to advert again in the new year. Moving on to the tracker, lastly, so the numbers are coming down. They're perhaps slightly higher than they should be, but we've had a little bit of a hiatus in the summer because of COVID, but the focus is back on this again. So 2 of the recommendations, 2 high and 2 medium, relates to former tenant arrears. So we haven't formally followed those up yet, but we will be. And the other ones I'm not particularly worried about them because I know that work is in progress to move those along. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I open it up for questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Just I got a couple of quickies on the Appendix B, the outstanding report. There are quite a number to do with IT, which now have a revised implementation date of 31/12/20, and also complaints is due. I'm just seeking reassurance that these are realistic start dates now, and it's not just being pushed in the long grass again or being delayed by COVID.
So I can take the first one, which is the software licensing one. So the revised policy did go to the information governance group. I think we met last week or the week before. So that's just doing the rounds of getting everyone's agreement to that one. So that one is sort of finished. The IT asset management one, things have moved on since we did that audit because of COVID-19 and how we're working now. So we do need a revised IT strategy to help us on that one. And the complaints one, with so much going on across the council trying to deal with COVID-19, is that I'm happy for them to say, right, we're going to park that for now because it needs some time and attention. We need to get it right. But I know that they will be picking that up again. So I'm not worried, but I can pass on your concerns if you want me to.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just that, you know, they have been kicking around for a while now. You know, certainly the IT field has been disrupted by it. But it's not so much a question of can they do it by the 31st of December, but trying to get a realistic finish date rather than just all kicking it in the long grass and say, well, hopefully we can do it. You know, if they've actually got a plan, if it's not going to be until 30th of June, fair enough. Providing it's done by the 30th of June, it's just bring an element of realism into this.
And we do that when we tout the tracker around and we talk to the various people when we say, if we think genuinely they should get on with it, we say, come on, you know, you need a realistic date in there, you know, the audit committee will be interested. And likewise, this goes to SMB, so we get their input and their commitment to it as well. So I totally agree with you.
Thank you.
Simon Freeman.
Yeah, just picking up on the two that fall into my area really that Councillor Carter just picked up on. So in terms of software licensing, I think that will be pretty much resolved in line with the revised date that's been included in the tracker for presentation this evening. I think I do have some concerns about the IT strategy, particularly, and the 31st of December deadline this year for that being produced. You know, just to give the committee a flavour of some of the issues that we've been faced with. I mean, clearly everybody's been affected by the situation, and the way we're meeting tonight is an absolute indication of that for most people, that, you know, we're meeting virtually and using technology to hold these events. But, you know, there are a raft of things now that we've either done or are planning to do to make the whole environment work better under the current working arrangements. But to have that in a strategy by the 31st of December, I'm quite surprised by the date that's been included there for that one. So I absolutely take on board Councillor Carter's comments, and I think you'll probably see that there will be a revision to that. We are looking at things like Office 365 implementation, all the necessary upgrades to the IT infrastructure we need to make that happen. We're going through a whole new telephony system implementation at the moment, ready for launch early next year. And a whole raft of IT replacement that's taken place in the last 6 to 8 months just to enable people to work physically from home or remotely. So yeah, a huge amount of effort and work going in there, but I think it'd be a huge stretch of the imagination to think we'll hit the 31st of December. So we will look at that one again, Councillor Carter, and we will look to put a date on that means we can deliver it, and it will be meaningful, and it will reflect all the things that we're working on to deliver at the current time.
Thank you.
I really look forward to it being done by the original set dates. But no, thank you. Good point raised by Councillor Carter. any other questions? My connection's unstable for a second there. Can you now hear me?
Yes.
No.
No, you've frozen again.
I think we need an IT strategy to get round that, Simon.
Oh, I think I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. No.
No,
Apologies. Oh, this.
we got that.
We can hear you now, Chair, I think.
Thank you very much.
The bit where you was criticising your internet connection, we could hear you.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Right. Any more questions on the internal audit reports?
No.
I think the only question from me, Sarah, is the risk of fraud around a lot of the grants that were given out during COVID. You mentioned it.
So Chair, we are aware of what's happening with the grants. We've been in communication with the Revenues and Benefits Manager. We've been looking at their processes, giving advice as we go along, and we've actually pulled in the Corporate Fraud Manager from Epping to give us some technical advice on a couple of potential frauds where we've we've stopped a lot of frauds happening at the start, but there's one or two there where we're looking at to see if they are real frauds. So please be assured that it is on the top of everyone's mind when we're giving out huge sums of money.
Lovely, thank you. Right, back to the recommendation on page 51. The committee reviews the outcome of the work of the Internal Audit Service for the period of September to November and identifies any issues for further consideration. Is that noted or considered?
Agreed or noted.
Or reviewed.
Both.
Lovely. On to, I realise my internet is poor at the moment, so on to agenda item 14. And I'll hand over to Simon Freeman to present the report on behalf.
Thank you, Chair. Stuart Mosley sends his apologies to the committee this evening. Unfortunately, he had a bit of an accident and he's ended up in A&E today. So he can't be with us this evening, unfortunately, but he is okay. And I agreed that I'd just present the report for him. It was really brought to the committee tonight just as an update on progress that's being made with reviews to strategic risks following previous reports that have been presented to the committee over the past 12 months. You'll see from the body of the report, probably from paragraph 5 onwards, that there were quite a number of amendments made to try and make the strategic risks more relevant and aligned to the corporate priorities. So they've all been reported and set out within the document. I think I do need to extend an apology to the committee this evening in respect of the appendices to the report. I note that comments have been made on previous reports this evening around the font and typeface that's being used. Unfortunately, 2 of the appendices just aren't, in my opinion, readable, and we will work on that to make sure that doesn't happen again for the committee. That there's a huge amount of information trying to be put onto too small a page, and it just doesn't work in terms of being able to read the content. So I do express my apologies for that. The recommendations for the committee tonight are to note the amendments that have been made to the strategic risks and the variations on the residual risk scores. Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to read it. It was one of the reports that came out with the main agenda papers on time, but I'm happy to take any questions. And if I can't answer them, I'll make sure that Stuart Mosley provides a response back to the committee.
Chair. Have we lost the chair again?
I think he's frozen again. I would suggest if he doesn't come back that the vice chair chairs this item so we can get through it.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's coming back, does it?
Should we go to the vice chair?
I think so.
Who's that?
Oh, all sorts happening now.
I don't know who the vice chair is.
The vice chair, Councillor Jezard.
Is it Jodie?
It's
No.
Shannon.
Shannon.
Oh, it's Shannon.
So unmute yourself. Oh,
Sorry, my internet is actually quite funny as well.
Oh, hello, Shannon.
Can everyone hear me okay? Is that going quite... Is everyone all good? Okay.
Yes.
Right, bear with me 1 second. So we were on to item agenda 14. So we just need to agree what is on page 66.
I think there was a
We're
question from
on
Councillor
question
Carter.
Oh yes, Councillor Carter, if you've got a question.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad Mr. Freeman has picked up the font size. It's not so much the font size; it's the size of the paper.
Yeah.
Either A1 or AO. How on earth you produce a document that size, I don't know, but it's totally impractical. I think you sort of have to sort of break it down into some smaller bits somewhere.
Yeah, we will work on that, Councillor Carter.
Perhaps ought to go to the IT strategy. On the CR04, lack of adequate council housing as a risk. It's about page 72, I think. Why is the risk owner Andrew Murray when new housing is run by Assets and Regeneration under Jane Greer?
So I'm just trying to get to the page, Councillor Carter. Apologies.
Don't worry. I'll email them to you in the morning, and we'll pick up from there.
Okay.
It will take you a little while. I've got another question also on that one, but I think it's probably going to be easier to email it. So
happy to deal with it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
All good. Any more questions or comments? No. Are we okay to agree page 66? Do
Noted.
recommendations?
Read.
65. A and B. Are we on the same page?
Yeah, 66 A and B.
Ah,
Is he back? He's back.
he's back.
66.
Yes, that's what I said. Yeah, recommendations on page 66 A and B. Are they noted?
Noted.
Agreed. Noted.
Noted.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the meeting with 1 minute to spare. I apologise for my internet connection. Thank you, Councillor Jezard, for stepping into the breach. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.